Hey y'all, Chris Stegall here from MK Partners, back with another quick Salesforce video. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about Pardot and Engagement Studio, both because it's something that you will encounter early and often in using Pardot, and also because it's something that I encountered recently again on the certification exam. So we're going to go over some fundamentals as they relate to wait times in Engagement Studio. I think wait used to have a different name. I think it was called pause, even in the middle of the steps of Engagement Studio, but now we know pause as pausing the program overall, and then waits at individual steps are called waits. So a little vocabulary specificity update. And now where it gets tricky is what wait means in terms of the different components. So what you'll see when you're doing an action with a wait requirement will be slightly different than what you see on a trigger or a rule, and we'll jump into that today. So let me throw my Engagement Studio screen up here. You'll recognize this maybe as the little sample webinar process that we built last time. I'll zoom in so that you can actually see what's going on this screen here. So as you can see, we've got our Engagement Studio program, and each of these little bubbles is a step of that process. So first, we're sending out that email invite that says, you're invited to the webinar we're throwing on date X. Then we are going to be listening for 7 days for this, for the email open to occur, and then sort people accordingly. So let's look at how waits affect the different components. I'll just add a hypothetical component here. Let's see if I can't see that very well. I will do some zooming to make it bigger. There we go. So let's say we're going to do an action, something like sending an email, notifying a user, something like that. There, when you have your when question, immediately, very straightforward. On date, also very straightforward. Pick a date. That's the date the action will execute. If you choose wait, it's going to essentially pause everybody in that step. So that's why they used pause before. It's going to hold people in that step, start a timer, wait for the certain number of days to pass, and then execute the action. So if I made this 3 days here, we would have the program starts, this email immediately gets sent out, then this email waits 3 days from that send, and then it fires. Great. So actions hold the person for the wait period and then execute the action. Now, how would that differ if this was a trigger? Well, triggers are essentially listeners, right? So they are listening constantly for an event to occur, an action to be taken, and then they will sort accordingly, split accordingly. So for example, an email open, evaluate when, is up to a maximum of 5 days. So what this is listening for or looking at is the email gets sent as soon as we start our program. And now, if you have this set to evaluate up to a maximum of 5 days, what that means is that that trigger, that listener, is going to be listening for somebody to open that email for 5 days. If they open it 15 minutes after it gets sent, the trigger fires, they get sorted into the right box. If they open it after 2 days, the trigger hears it, it fires, they get sorted into the right box. Once you hit that maximum number, so in this case 5 days, the trigger has been listening the whole time. If it's 5 days elapse and somebody didn't activate the trigger, now they go into the second box. So up to a maximum means the trigger is constantly listening and looking for action and acting immediately as soon as it gets triggered. Wait, on the other hand, is going to be more similar to wait on the previous step or the previous example with emails. So a wait on a trigger is going to not listen constantly. It's got headphones on. And then once the period goes by, so once 5 days elapse, it takes off the headphones, checks, hey, how many people opened that email? And whether you opened it 15 minutes after it was sent, or 2 days after it was sent, or 4 days, 23 hours, and 59 minutes after it was sent, as soon as those headphones come off, it's going to evaluate all those triggers and then sort people accordingly. So if you want actions to be taken contextually based on when somebody responded, you'll use up to a maximum of, and that way, as soon as the trigger gets activated, they get sorted and routed accordingly. If instead you want everybody to be held in the same bucket until the divide can happen, and that way everyone's on the same time schedule, then you would use a wait. The last component we'll want to look at is a rule. A rule evaluates, if this field on the prospect is this answer, then we'll sort them one way. If it's this, then we'll sort them the other way. It's like a trigger, but more of a formula. So as opposed to having something actively listening, looking for an action to be taken, this is just looking for data to match a rule and executing as soon as you've told it to check for that. So let's say we made one that said, if a prospect score is over 50, then we want to route them one way versus the other way. Evaluate when. Immediately means right now. One of the tricky things to avoid is if the rule that you're going to is going to be influenced by actions that prospects take earlier in the program, then you want to give them time to take those steps so the data gets updated before you run the rule. If you say, hey, let's send an email, and that's going to invite people to fill out this form, for registering for the webinar in our example. And if they register for the webinar, we're going to bump their score by 15 points. And then if they attend the webinar, we're going to bump their score by another 15 points. And now at the end, I want to evaluate who has more than 50 points because then they're warm enough to get a phone call. If you send that email and the very next step is evaluate if they have the points, that person hasn't had time to fill out the form yet. So you're just going to be evaluating essentially whether or not they had the threshold point score as soon as you drop them into the program. So for the most part, you're going to want to put a weight on a rule because I feel like the most time you're using rules is when you're trying to adjust based on actions taken earlier in the program. If you were going to use a rule to evaluate something or a status that existed prior to the start of the program, that's usually something you would address in your lists, in your segmentation lists. Make a segmentation rule that says prospects with over this score get dropped into the program, things like that. So a weight on this is going to be similar to the trigger, where the system is going to wait until the period has elapsed, and then it will check the rule against all of the prospects. Prospects that meet the rule will go into our column on one side. Prospects that don't meet the rule will go into the other side. And that is the gist of weights. There are a couple other things that come up with wait times on the exam and in your day-to-day. One of the things that comes up a lot, question-wise, for new users of Pardot or Engagement Studio is how do wait times deal with business hours? Because when you create your Engagement Studio program, on the very first screen, it asks you to determine your business hours for email, so days of the week and times. So, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, 9 to 4, whenever you want to bookend your emails so that they're not hitting people's inboxes at Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning when they're not checking their work emails. So for example, let's say we have an email step, and when people land on this step in the program is supposed to wait for 5 days and then send them an email. Well, what happens if they drop into that step on a Tuesday and then Pardot waits 5 days, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Oh no, it's Sunday. That's not in our business hours. What Pardot will do in that situation is mark them as having completed the step. I shouldn't say mark. Pardot doesn't indicate that the wait is over for them, but internally Pardot does know that the wait is over for them. And then as soon as business hours roll around on Monday, then that email gets sent out. So it will always wait for a minimum number of days that you input. If the end of that wait falls outside of business hours and the action is an email, you don't have to worry that that email is going to go out outside of your already established business hours. The wait will just hold over long enough until business hours. The other thing that comes up both on certification exams and in real life is what happens if you pause a program to make changes while somebody is in a waiting pattern. So you're in the middle of, running a drip campaign that gives people information, releases them sort of new deals based on where they're falling in the process, tries to fight some abandoned cart features, things like that. You pause it to update a landing page or update a form that is being checked in the Engagement Studio. If it's a 5-day wait, somebody's on step 3, and then you pause the program, go ahead and make your changes, and then start the program again, they are going to pick up right where they left off. So they'll have 2 more days to wait, and then they'll continue advancing through Engagement Studio. So you don't have to worry about pausing a program, cutting your waits short, or extending them indefinitely. The fear would be, I have all of these people 4 days through a 5-day wait, but I keep getting requested changes. I keep pausing the program, making changes, and they keep resetting to day 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I got to make changes again. That won't happen, which is something that we really appreciate the developers at Salesforce for, the developers at Pardot for. They will work exactly as you would expect a pause to work. So pauses, place a pause on the wait. The wait resumes from where it left off the minute you start running the program again. All right, so to recap, when it comes to waiting in Engagement Studio, when it's an action like sending an email, etc., the wait will wait from them getting to that step the certain number of days and then execute the action. When it comes to triggers, if you have it evaluating up to a maximum of 5 days, 6 days, whatever it is, then it's constantly listening. And the minute that the trigger is activated, it executes the step. If instead you use a wait for 5 days, that's when the trigger has the headphones on. It's not listening at all. It's just counting off the days. And then as soon as it hits the end of that wait, then it evaluates and executes. And rules, when those wait, they are like the trigger with the headphones on. They wait, counting the days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then on the end of that wait, they evaluate the rule and then sort accordingly. When you pause a program, the waits pause where you want them to. And when a wait ends outside of business hours on a send email action, it will hold off sending that email until it is within business hours again. So sometimes your waits will actually be longer than anticipated, but only to maintain the integrity of your business hours, your schedule for the program overall. So those are the things that you're likely to encounter when it comes to waiting and pausing in Engagement Studio. If you have any additional questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below so that we can update some content for you. Be sure to like and subscribe here to always get the latest news from Salesforce, helpful how-tos, and get a glimpse behind the scenes of a Salesforce partner and our day-to-day operations. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.